So I'm very excited about today because we are starting our Love No Matter What series. And if you were here with us last year, we did Love No Matter What. We had a different series last year called Love No Matter What. And the whole point of that is to kind of make our church, make it a church where that is a phrase that is on everybody's lips. Like, we want everybody to be Christians, to live in such a way that love no matter what just kind of defines how they live out their Christianity. And so last year, we kind of introduced this concept. And one of the things that we did was we walked through the Gospels and we saw how Jesus interacts with the people that he comes into contact with. Because if you read the Gospels, what you'll see is that he came in contact with a lot of people who you wouldn't think to love. Especially back in the day, he came into contact with people who had skin diseases, who lived in separate communities because they couldn't come into with the city with other people. He met with the rejects. He met with the Samaritans, the minorities of the day. He met with the people in the majority. He met with religious leaders. And what's so amazing is that over and over, what you'll see is that Jesus has this pattern in how he treats people. And it could be summed up and defined like this: he loved them no matter what. Like, even his enemies. I think the biggest expression of this is he's on the cross, he's hanging there, he's dying, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, his religious enemies, the people who wanted him crucified, they're standing in front of him. And what does he pray to God? He says, God, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And it's just this amazing expression from Jesus that he constantly and consistently loved the people in his life no matter what, whether they were trying to kill him, whether they were born into poverty, whether they were rich or poor, whether they were liberal or conservative. Well, I'm jumping over my words this morning. It doesn't matter who they were. He always showed them love no matter what. So last year was kind of all about why we love no matter what. Why? Because Jesus did it. That was the whole point. So, but I don't know about you. I'm a kind of an idealist. I love talking about love. It's so great. And I love talking about these concepts, and I love talking about peace and joy and music. That's just kind of who I am. But here's the thing: it's one thing to know why you do stuff and be motivated by why you do stuff, and it's another thing to know. It's another thing to know what you're doing. But if you don't know how you're doing it, it doesn't matter. The question how is just an incredibly practical question. I think it doesn't matter if you know why to love other people no matter what, if you don't know how to do it. How is a completely different question. So I don't know if you've had this moment where you really felt compelled to study for a test, or you're like, oh man, I'm going to fail this. You knew why you were studying, but if you don't know how to study, it doesn't matter. You can be super motivated to do something, but if you don't know how to do it, it doesn't mean that you'll produce any results. It doesn't mean that you'll bear fruit. You have to know how. So last year, Love No Matter What was all about why. This year, it's all about how. How do we love the people in our lives? I think we've all had this moment, right? Where you're like, yeah, love no matter what. And then you go to work and you're like, oh, my boss is the worst. How do I love that guy? Or you go to a family get together and you're like, oh, I do love my family. It's hard. Here's the thing: loving people is very difficult, and knowing how to do it changes everything. You can be sufficiently motivated, but if you don't know how, you'll never do it. So that's what this whole series is about: how to love other people. And thankfully, the question how, the Bible has an answer for that. It actually has a whole genre that answers that question, how. And the genre is called wisdom. Wisdom. Wisdom answers the question, how. If you've read the Bible, you've probably taken away some of the commands. Commands tell you what. They tell you what to do. And some of the stories, you remember the stories Jesus coming and dying for us and raising again on the third day and living to intercede for us and preparing a place for us. That story provides motivation. It provides a why. Stories answer why. Commands answer what. But wisdom answers how. How do we love people no matter what? And so what we're going to do for this series is we're going to be in the book of Proverbs. Who's excited? I love Proverbs. It's going to be great. And so the book of Proverbs is probably the most famous wisdom book. It's all about how to live a good life. And if you read the Proverbs, what you'll see is that Solomon, the guy who wrote the Proverbs, he talks about relationships a lot. The book opens with a dialogue between him and his son. So right away, you see this relationship, this family relationship. He talks about marriage. He talks about falling in love. He talks about friendship. He talks about work. The book of Proverbs is riddled with relationships. And so if we're asking this question, how do we love no matter what? The best place that we can go, I think, is the book of Proverbs. When I was I think I was like 5. I grew up in a really good Christian family, and we didn't have cable because the devil lived on cable. I don't know if my parents ever said that, but that's how I felt. But here's the thing: like once a quarter, we'd go to my grandma's house, and my grandma was nuts. She's just a crazy individual, and I love her. She's so fun, but she had cable, and so Saturday morning, my brother and I would like watch Cartoon Network. Oh my gosh. And it was so fun. Like at that time, one of the shows that was on Cartoon Network was this show called He-Man. Anybody ever seen He-Man? Oh yeah. Let me give you the premise of He-Man. There's this bad guy. His name's Skeletor, and he's got like a skull for a face. And every character is like they've been in the gym for 72 million years. And basically He-Man is also jacked, and so he fights this guy, and there's a sword and all this stuff. When you're like a 6-year-old kid, it's like, whoa, So anyway, after about 28 minutes of them fighting, there's this like really weird thing that happens at the end of He-Man. There's like, they do like a 30-second, 2 minutes like PSA at the end where He-Man comes on and says, kids, one of the secrets to life is friendship. It's just like so awkward because he just fought this guy for like 28 minutes, and now he's sitting there like, even Skeletor can be my friend, And it's like, oh, that was a bad transition, This is weird. So we're sitting in our planning meeting, and I'm going to get, we're talking about how I'm going to do friendship. I'm going to take friendship. And that was the first thing that popped into my mind. And it popped into my mind because I think that there's like so many different ways to hear about like friendship. There's like so many different voices on relationships out there, and some of them come from He-Man, some of them come from the Bible, some of them come from your therapist, some of them come from your friends, and not all of it's bad. But what I really believe is this: that the Scripture has all the answers our hearts long for. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to ask this question of the Scriptures: what does it look like to love no matter what in a friendship? What does it look like to do that in a friendship? And I think we're going to get some answers. So if you brought your Bibles, let's turn to Proverbs 17. We're going to be bouncing all over the Proverbs. But we're going to start in verse 17. And verse 17 says this: a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. If you read the Proverbs and you like pick all the ones on friendship out, and you kind of go through all of those, what you'll see is a pattern emerge. You'll begin to see that Solomon has kind of a way of thinking about friendship. And I think that this verse is a really good example of that theme that comes out in the Proverbs. If I had to sum up how Solomon sees friendship, I'd say it like this: he thinks friendship means commitment. Friendship means commitment. It's a commitment. Look at what he said in Proverbs 17:17. Can we throw that back up there? A friend loves when? At all times. What's kind of amazing is that if you look up that Hebrew word all, it's crazy. It means all times. What he's trying to say is that a friend is committed no matter what. A friend loves no matter what. A friend is the person who is there when everybody else has walked away. That's your friend. And he says a brother is born for adversity. Sometimes, I don't know if you've ever had that moment where you're like, my friends are much nicer. My friends like me more. My friends are much more supportive. My friends are much more life-giving than even my family. Sometimes we have this moment where the people that we belong to, the group that we belong to, isn't our family anymore. It's our friends. And if you know the story of Solomon's life, Solomon had lots of brothers, and they all wanted to kill him. So you can kind of see like the sentiment in that verse. Like brothers are born for adversity. Well, that was a real nice way to put it, Solomon. Like they were trying to kill you anyway. But there is a friend who a friend loves at all times, he says. So this is kind of the big idea for today. This is what I want you to be able to walk away with. We're going to talk about a couple other things, but this is the big idea that friendship means commitment. Friendship means commitment. One of the things that I love about the Proverbs and wisdom literature, because it's very practical, it's incredibly relatable. And so Solomon kind of talks about these three kind of really relatable problems that we're going to go through. So I want to show you this first really relatable problem. It's this. Here's a really relatable problem that Solomon has. My friend is making a mistake. My friend is making a mistake. Have you ever had that? You ever had that moment where you're like, okay, you're dating that girl again? Okay, that's not good, Or maybe you've had that moment where it's like, you're spending like all of your money on this and this and this. Like, what are you doing with your life? Or maybe you've had that moment where your friend is like, I think I'm going to leave my family and divorce my wife. It's like, it's not, no. Mistake. Maybe you've had that moment where you were making a mistake and your friend had to come and say, dude, that's not it. You don't want to do that. Maybe you've had that moment where somebody did that poorly and it ended the relationship. Have you ever seen that happen? When I was in college, I remember there was this girl in our friend group who was pursuing this guy, and the story ends. They're married and they're super happy, but somebody else in the friend group didn't like that guy. And so she confronted her, don't date that guy, and that ruined their relationship. Sometimes the way that we tell our friends that they're making a mistake can lead to a split. Here's what Solomon says about this relatable problem. He says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. Profuse means a lot. So what Solomon is saying is that sometimes you'll have people in your life who say, go, 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 do the stuff, go do that, leave that person, make bad choices, go. And Solomon's saying like, hey, you might want to reconsider that relationship. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy. And he says, faithful are the wounds of a friend. And I love that he calls them wounds, because sometimes in a relationship, when we have to call somebody out and we have to say, hey, you're making a mistake here, it hurts. It hurts. But he says they're faithful. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Here's another one, Psalm 27, verse 9. He says, oil and perfume make the heart glad, and sweetness of a friend comes in his earnest counsel. The sweetness of friendship is this idea that your friends can give you counsel to help you along in your life. How do you love no matter what in a friendship when somebody's making a mistake? Well, that's actually a super relatable problem that the scriptures talk about all the time. I had a friend a couple months ago who asked me, Josh, what is the difference between the verse where Jesus says, judge not lest you be judged, judging's bad, and then when Paul says, judge those inside of the church? What's the difference between unhealthy judgment and healthy judgment? What is the difference between calling somebody out in a negative way that's sinful, that leads to destruction, and what's the difference between that and calling somebody out in a way that leads to healing and health? I think the answer is this: it's commitment. It's commitment. Think about a judgment that you've received in your life. It was very likely, I call it a drive-by, right? Because somebody, they just kind of swoop into your life and you're messing up, see you later, And it's like, oh, I think I hate that person, It's like, oh, Jesus, change my heart, Sometimes the difference between hearing a criticism that changes your life and hearing a criticism that leads to more devastation and burdening and hurt, the difference is very often how committed that person is to your life. I have a friend here in this church. His name's Joe, and I value our friendship a lot because he tells it to me straight. Like, man, and he's got no filter. He sometimes wears this shirt that says, I'm a Christian, but I cuss a little. He does. Anyway, one of the things I love about getting a phone call from Joe is that I know that he's going to tell me I'm doing something wrong, but he's doing it in a way that I'm going to receive. Because I know, and I can hear it in his voice, how committed he is to me and this church. He wants me to do better. He wants this church to reach more people. He wants me to get better at connecting people to the God of the universe. And because I know that, because I know his heart for me and this church, I listen to him every time. And sometimes I disagree with him, but I can hear it in a way that brings health and healing, that builds me up. I hear it in a way that leads to a positive outcome. I don't know if you've ever had that moment where somebody called you out and it wasn't good. Here's kind of like four things that are characteristics of unhealthy judgment. Number one, it's unilateral. It's one way. You don't have a say in this. I just get to tell you what you're doing wrong. I get to put you in your place. It's unilateral. It's one way. It's also focused on the past. It's always, you made this mistake, and we're going to focus on this mistake, even though it was in the past, so there's nothing you could do to change it, but we are going to focus on this, and I want you to know just how bad you were 2 years ago or last week or yesterday. It's focused on the past. It's also focused on your weaknesses. Here's all the ways that you messed up. Here's all the things that you lack. Here's all the problems that you have in your life. It's focused on weakness. And it's also occasional. It's that drive-by nature. Somebody gets to come in and just say, man, you're messing up, and then they leave. It's occasional. Healthy feedback, healthy judgment looks very different. It's, instead of it being unilateral, it's conversational. It's like, hey, man, I noticed that you're doing this, this, and this. I noticed that you said these 3 things or something like that. Hey, what's going on in your life? It's asking a question. It's starting a conversation. Instead of a one-way, overpowering, I'm better than you statement, it's a, what's going on? There's an equal power in that relationship. It's a conversation, but it's also future-oriented. It's like, hey, I know you did that in the past. I know that, and that was a mistake. It's okay. But here's the thing. Let's talk about how to get it better in the future. It's focused on your improvement. And when you do that, you're communicating commitment. If we're talking about the future, what you're implying is I'm going to be there in the future. I'm going to be there with you. I want to walk with you through this issue. It's also strengths-focused. Instead of it being like, here's all the things you lack, when we're going to change the future, here's all the things that you can do that I know you're good at, that I know is true of you, that will make you be able to accomplish the changes that need to be made. It's strengths-focused, and it's constant. Instead of a drive-by thing, friendship is a constant interaction, and it's in that consistency that you build up a history with a person. The first time that Joe called me out, I was so mad at him. I was like, Joe, I can't believe you. But here's the thing. Over time, we've built up this relationship where it's like, man, I crave that feedback. I want to know how to do better. So unhealthy feedback looks like it's unilateral, it's one way, it's past-oriented, it's weakness-oriented, and it's a drive-by, it's occasional. Whereas healthy judgment, healthy correction is a conversation between equals. It's future-oriented, and it's about strengths, and it's constant. You're having a constant conversation about how each other are doing. When you do that, what you're implying is commitment. I'm committed to you. I want you to have a better future. I don't want you to struggle with this. I don't want you to struggle with your budget. I don't want you to struggle with the sins that are in your life. I don't want you to struggle with how you treat other people. I want you to change so that you can have a better future, and I'm going to work with you through that. Solomon says the sweetness of friendship is in the earnest counsel. You know what that word earnest means? It means I need you. I want you to change. I want something better for you. Yeah, he says the oil and perfume make the heart glad, and sweetness of a friend comes in his earnest counsel. How do you love no matter what when your friend is making a mistake? You give him earnest counsel. You wound him faithfully. And you do it in a way that builds them up instead of tearing them down. That's how you love no matter what when your friend is making a mistake. Here's another relatable problem. Who's your friend? I don't know if you've noticed this. When you're 5, all you think about is your friendships. Like, who are you going to play with on the playground? And, like, how far can your friend throw the football? Because that's so cool. And let's go outside, and we're going to play army guys, and we're going to build forts. I'm doing this from, like, a guy's perspective because I'm a guy. I don't know what girls do. I think they braid their hair or something. It looks fun. Anyway. I don't know. Sorry. But here's the thing. Like, when you're young, it's like, oh, man, I want this relationship, and I'm going to build into these people, and I'm going to, yes, this is super fun. And that's where your joy comes from. And then as you grow, relationships become like a little tense, and you get into junior high and high school, and relationships are very hierarchical. Jocks are friends with jocks, and the cheerleaders are friends with cheerleaders. You know the stereotypes. And then what happens after school is you have this complete crash in your friendship. Like, if you're growing, what happens after high school is you go to college, and then boom, you left all of your community back at home. And all of a sudden, you have to make a new community of friends, but only for 4 years, because after 4 years, you're leaving them again. And then you have to build friends again in your workplace. And I just turned 30, and so here's another ebb and flow of relationships is when you start having kids, man, I don't have time for friends. When am I going to hang out? I got 5 kids. That's not going to happen. And so here's the thing, like I think this is very relatable when I talk about when I talk to my friends about where our friendship is at, it's always this, oh dude, I'd love to get together with you, but oh man. And I talked to a guy a couple of months ago and it was like, I feel like I had kids and then I just lost my community. And here's the thing, you need to know this because this is really important. Friendship ebbs and flows over your lifetime. Sometimes you have less time, sometimes you have more time. And just because you're in the less time doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. And it doesn't mean that you're less than. It doesn't mean that you're somebody that nobody wants to hang out with. It just means it's an ebb, and it's going to come back. Don't worry. But here's this really relatable problem. Who is actually my friend? Maybe you've gone through a problem in which your friends deserted you. Who's your friend? Who's your friend? Who are you going to call when things are going south? Who's your friend? This is a really relatable problem. Solomon talks about this. Can we throw Proverbs 18:24 up there? He says this, a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. A man of many companions may come to ruin, but there is a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Can you kind of see this? Here's the funny thing about people's approach to friendship. There's like two strategies. There's extroverted strategies, and then there's introverted strategies, right? So if you don't know this, let's just kind of go through this. Here's a good description of extroverts. Right? Extrovert, when you're grounded, they just kind of like, I can't hang out with people. My world is falling apart. Oh no. Here's another one. Introverts. So you have two friends. They're just kind of hanging out in a meadow. That's real nice. There's a brick wall in between them, but whatever. The caption says, this is great. Just you and me and this brick wall you've built between us. It's kind of being friends with an introvert, Here's another one. How introverts make friends. The red space is dogs count as friends. And then the maze space is an extrovert found them, liked them, and adopted them. As an introvert, thank you, extroverts, for adopting me. So here's the thing. The way that we approach friendships is really, really interesting. Solomon says, there's a man of many companions may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Who is your friend? Extroverts, I've got some bad news for you. Not everybody who follows you on Instagram is your friend. I mean, sorry. Introverts, I have good news for you. More people like you than you think. Sorry, extroverts, you just gotta get the short end of the stick there. But anyway, Solomon says, a man of many companions may come to ruin. Here's the thing, here's what he's asking. Who is your friend? Remember, we said friendship for Solomon means commitment. So just think through this with me. If you have thousands of friends, how can you be committed to a person? How can you stick closer than a brother to thousands of people? If friendship is commitment, then what that means is extroverts, you have less friends than you think, but you have stronger bonds also than you think. Introverts. I love this idea because, here's the thing. As introverts, you can get, so much in your head. You're like, oh, nobody likes me. But here's the thing. You're talking to yourself, and you're never talking to anybody else. And so here's the thing. If you can step out of your anxiety and step out of your depression and step out of whatever's going on inside of you, if you can get out of that for 2 seconds, I think what you'll see is that there's a whole list of people who are committed to you in a way that you didn't know before. Commitment. If friendship is commitment, then what that means is that there are friends who stick closer than a brother because they're committed to you. This is a really beautiful, beautiful truth. One of the things, the word for friend in the Proverbs, the Hebrew word, it's the same word for neighbor. It's really interesting because I feel like Solomon's just kind of saying hey, your friends are the people in proximity to you. They're the people in your life. You might have more than you think. You might also have less than you think, so that kind of stinks. But anyway, a friend sticks closer than a brother. How do you love no matter what in your friendships? You got to know who your friends are. You got to know who your friends are. You can't commit to thousands of people, and you can't commit to nobody because you think you have no friends. Here's the thing. You have a list of people who kind of fit in that Venn diagram that I'm trying to make with my arms. There's a slim people there where you can really commit to. So here's my challenge for you this morning. Why don't you write out a list of the people that you want to commit to? Because there's times in the ebbs of our lives when we feel like we have no friends. If you read the studies, scientists or sociologists are saying that Americans feel more lonely and more isolated than ever. like the way that we approach friendships is out of need and out of desperation. I can remember when I was first dating my wife, I had this wonderful car. It was a Toyota RAV4, white. And it was the best because I could sneak her in the trunk into the drive-in, and so we didn't have to pay for her. And I'm confessing my sin there. I'm not saying that you should do that. But that's what we did. And pizza. We put pizza there too. Because they make you pay for food. That's ridiculous. Anyway, again, sin. But here's the thing. I remember sitting in that car in the family video parking lot and having sent a bunch of text messages to like my high school friends and sitting with her and just like nobody had responded to me. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, I don't have any friends. This is ridiculous. And feeling so like shameful and worthless in that moment. I wish somebody would have said to me at that moment that friendships ebb and they flow. And knowing who your friends are is wisdom. Knowing who your friends are is wisdom. Because when it comes to answering that question, how do I love no matter what in my relationships, you got to know who your friends are. You might have more friends than you think, and you might have less friends than you think. But the key is commitment. Who are you committed to, and who is committed to you? Write out that list, because the next time you ebb, you're going to need that list. The next time you feel lonely, you're going to need that list. The next time you're down about how nobody likes you, you're going to need that list, because there's the list of people that are committed to you. That's Solomon's second very relatable problem. Who is your friend? A man of many friends may come to ruin, but there's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. Here's the last one, very relatable. I call this the friendship warning. You ever had this problem? My friend is toxic. Ugh. Have you ever had like a bad friendship, And I define this as like you're giving more than you're receiving. And let me say this, because every friendship has ebbs and flows as well. Like sometimes your friend is going to have a really deep and desperate and horrible need, like moving. Moving is the worst. Can we just talk about that for a second? Your friends are going to be like, hey, I'm moving, but I'll give you pizza. It's like, that's not worth it. That's how I feel. Here's the thing. Every relationship is going to have ebbs and flows where you need something and your friend is going to give more, and then it's going to flow again into something else where they need more and you're going to give them. But here's the thing. Sometimes when we zoom out and we look at the general history of our relationship with somebody, sometimes we come to this moment where you realize, wow, this person is taking from me way more than I give to them. Solomon writes this in Proverbs 19. He says, wealth brings many new friends, but a poor man is deserted by his friend. Solomon, if you've ever read Ecclesiastes, you know that he's super angsty. Solomon's like kind of a depressing figure. And he was also the richest person in the world. And you can kind of feel that in this proverb. Wealth brings many new friends. Yeah, whoop-de-doo. But a poor man is deserted by his friend. And so sometimes we have relationships, here's what Solomon's saying, sometimes we have friendships, in which people aren't committed to us, they're committed to our goods. They're not committed to us, they're committed to what we have to offer. They're not committed to us, they're committed to getting what we bring to the table. That's the definition of a toxic relationship. What do you do when you have a toxic relationship? Here's another proverb. Solomon says this, Proverbs 19:6. Many seek the favor of a generous man, and everyone is a friend to him who gives gifts. Kind of underscoring that point. Sometimes people are attracted to what you have and not necessarily attracted to you. What do you do when you have a toxic friend? Over and over, if you read this Proverbs, what you'll see is there's three characters that appear over and over. There's a wise man. There's a wise man who is constantly talked about as like, yes, be friends with that guy. The wise man, he's the good one. You want to be friends with somebody who is wise. That's good. And then there's another one called the fool. Solomon talks about the fool over and over again. And basically, if you kind of compile all the Proverbs that talk about fools, Solomon, basically what he's saying is to set up boundaries with fools. It's not to cast them out. It's not that you shouldn't be with somebody who is toxic. It's not that you shouldn't love no matter what. But it is that you have to have good boundaries. Let's talk about boundaries for a second. Can you throw that graphic up there? Here's what boundaries kind of look like in relationships. I know that's kind of hard to see. On the left, you have somebody with healthy boundaries. You can see the dotted lines. They're able to know somebody and be known by somebody. They can let you in and they can come out in order to love you. That's a healthy boundaries. Then, I don't know if we all know this person with limited or non-existent boundaries. They're the person who can't say no. right? They need you to like them. And so if you ask me to do something, yes, I'm going to do all of it. And even though it completely drains my life, even though it steals the energy from my soul, I'm going to say yes over and over. And they never take care of themselves. And the problem with non-existent boundaries is that these people end up resenting the other people in their lives because they constantly say yes, because they're constantly giving. They reach a crash point in which they feel like I'm giving everything and nobody's giving anything to me. But really, it's because they were never able to say no. They needed the other person to like them so much that they allowed themselves to be drained of all of their energy. One of my favorite modern poets writes, you always get what you allow in life. You get what you allow. And when you have no boundaries, you allow your soul to be stolen by other people. Here's another one, loose or porous boundaries. This is the person who is a little bit more healthy. They're guarded, but they're still a little bit open. This is like the average introvert, right? It's like, I know there's something good in there. Talk to me. How you doing? I'm okay. No, really, how you doing? Okay, I'll tell you. That's kind of like what this person is. They're a little bit guarded, but they're still able to have relationships. That's not the best, but it's not the worst either. Here's another one that's kind of not great. Rigid. A wall. You all know this person because you're like, hey, how you doing? And they're like, why? Why do you want to know? And so here's the thing, they're just closed off, and it's really hard to get to know that person because they're overly bounded, they're overly protected, they don't feel safe with other people, and so they put up these giant walls around their hearts so that they'll never be hurt again, and it comes from a very vulnerable place. I want to have compassion and empathy for this. But if you're like that, what you need to know is you're going to get through life, and you're going to have this moment where you're like, I have no friends, and it's because you didn't let anybody in. You had too many boundaries. Healthy boundaries looks like this. Able to say no. When somebody asks you and you just can't do it, you don't move heaven and earth to do it for this person. You're able to just say, I just can't. And you're okay with that. And you know what you have to do in order to have that? You have to have a strong identity in Jesus. Because here's the thing, when our identity is in what people think of us, we'll always say yes. Hey, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And by the end of the week, you're like, I'm way overscheduled. If you have a strong identity in Jesus, you don't need people to like you, and you can just say, hey, I love you. I'd love to help you. I just can't do it right now. Here's another one. Able to ask for what you need. There are some people, me, who is like, if I'm unhealthy, I can get into this place where it's like people, I'm a burden to people, and I don't want to be a burden to people, so I'll never ask for what I need. And what happens over time is you get bitter because nobody's helping me. But it's like, I never asked for help, Here's the thing, you have to have strong identity in Jesus. Because in order for you to think that you're not a burden, you have to know that Jesus burdened himself. He died for you because he thought you were so worth it. And when you're full of that, then you can approach other people and say, hey, I might need help with this, and not be worried that they'll leave you. Here's another one, able to express your emotions. Healthy boundaries means that you can open up. You're not overly bounded. You don't have that wall between you. You can actually say, hey, this is how I feel about this situation. Here's the last one. This is a hard one. Able to assertively communicate problems. I don't know if you've ever had that friend who you're like, something's wrong. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. What's wrong? No, nothing's wrong, man. No, here's the thing. People with healthy boundaries aren't overly bounded. They can communicate when there's problems. And they can communicate in a way that doesn't lead to a division in the relationship. They can communicate it in a way that leads to healing and wholeness. That's what it's like to have healthy boundaries. How do you love somebody who is a taker? How do you love somebody who is stealing your my wife calls them emotional vampires because they just which I think is really funny. Anyway, how do you love somebody who is kind of toxic to you? How do you love them no matter what? I don't think the answer is to get rid of them completely unless there's some other more dangerous things happening. I think that the answer is to have strong and healthy boundaries because that allows you to love on them when you can and get what you need when you can't. Having healthy boundaries is how you deal with a friend who is maybe a bit more toxic. I want to close with this idea as the band comes up. When I was in Sunday school, this was back in the 90s, and I had this super sweet old lady who was like teaching us about Jesus, and she had the felt board. Do you remember the felt board, anybody? And basically you have these little kids over here next to maybe a river, and then you have Jesus over here, and he's on the felt board, so he's gonna like move over. You had to like unpeel him from the board and stick him to get him to move, so you're like doing this. He's coming over to you kids. He wants to be friends, and that's kind of like, that was like my lesson on friendship when I was little. And there's this idea like Jesus wants to be your friend. And I think like one of the things about when you're in like Sunday school, or you're like, man, we don't call it Sunday school anymore. when you're like in the kids service or something, we hammer this home. Jesus wants to be your friend. But I think like for some reason it like stops when you're like 6, and all of a sudden Jesus isn't your friend. He's the one who sends you to hell. Like that's kind of the message that you get if you grow, at least in my experience, if you grow up in the church. And you have to know this, that even if you're not a kid anymore, Jesus is still your friend. Think about how committed Jesus is to you. He died for you. Like he wanted a relationship with you so bad that he went to the cross to pay for all of your sins so that you could have a relationship with him. He's committed. And the best part about Jesus is that he's the God of the universe. You're like, Jesus, I need help moving. He's like, no problem, Okay, maybe not like that, but you know what I'm saying. God, there's some stuff in my soul. Like I'm broken. I need energy. I need peace. I need courage. I need strength for this situation. And he's the God who is your friend, who shows up for you, who helps you, who shows you his love by pouring himself out to you. He's the friend who is ultimately committed. And here's really what I believe, and this is kind of a cornerstone, bedrock part of our DNA here at One Hope, is that when you have an experience in a relationship with the God of the universe, it transforms you. It changes you. And so I have 2 challenges I want to end with. Grow your friendship with Jesus. 2 ways you can do that, 2 challenges. Here's number 1. Start praying more. Man, just talk to him. Sit in his presence and enjoy the delight that is his presence. Pray more. And here's one way you can do that. Set a timer for 2 minutes, and then every week add a minute. Like you're gonna sit there for 2 minutes and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I've been sitting here all day. But here's the thing, we become so, especially with our phones, we become so distracted and distractible. Practicing sitting in his presence and focusing on him, that's going to change your life because your friendship is going to grow with him. Here's the second challenge. Read his word. And here's what I would say. Start in the Psalms, because David had a beautiful friendship with the God of the universe. And when you read the Psalms, what you'll see is David saying, God, I have this problem. God, my enemies are against me. God, everybody's betraying me. God, I feel like I'm so guilty and shameful and dirty. God, my world is falling apart for me. And by the end of the Psalm, what you read is God showed up. And David ends the Psalms with praise. God, I love you. You free me. You set me into a free place, a wide open space. And when you read about somebody else's interaction with God, it'll feed your relationship with God. So those are the challenges. Go home and make a plan to grow in your friendship with God. I'm going to pray, and then we're going to worship. Jesus, I thank you that you are a good God. I thank you that you call us friends. It's so amazing that we who have sin in our lives, who often feel guilty, broken, and dirty, we who know our failures, it's so amazing that you want a relationship with us. Jesus, our hearts overflow with gratitude to you. We are so thankful for your love. Would you empower us to worship you this morning? We love you.